I got my Eagle Scout by the time I was 13. But like, let's be real. It was like my mom got my Eagle Scout for me by the time I was 13.
It's the story of every young man.
Yeah. Be warned. It was a warning, so pay attention. And the warning said, like, you cannot hide your thoughts or actions from the Lord. And like, okay, remember, I like doing diving, right? So I know how to jump off stuff. And that's what I felt like he was asking me to do, to just hurl myself over this cliff into the abyss. It was 3.5 years of basically a roommate situation, like where we were friends with each other, but like it never really got to the point of what I would call marriage because, she had some hangups. We turned away from polygamy. These are prophets, seers, and revelators telling us that if we turn from polygamy, we are in apostasy. Therefore, we are in apostasy. I was so angry at the church for lying to me. So angry. Because I gave them my whole heart, my whole life, and they lied.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 44 of the Clarity Podcast. I'm your host, Claire, and this week's guest was Thomas Fackrell. And Thomas shared with us one of the greatest love stories I've heard in a long time. You guys are going to want to stay tuned for all this and more on this week's episode of the Clarity Podcast. Everyone has a journey they're walking. And along that road, we are met with potholes, road bumps, rain, storms, and sometimes just fog. But through it all, we're really just looking for one thing: clarity. Clarity so we can walk with confidence in that next step. There's one source I run to for that clarity. In the darkest of nights, Jesus offers me light that shines through even the thickest storms. Welcome to the Clarity Podcast, where we find clarity through the one who saves us all. Everybody, and welcome to episode 44 of the Clarity Podcast. I'm your host, Claire, and this week's guest is Thomas Fackrell. Welcome to the podcast, Thomas.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we are so excited to hear your story. You were recommended by a friend of mine, and then you ended up reaching out to me before I could even get to you. So I'm super excited to hear your story in full. I've had a little bit of a glimpse into it. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit who you are, where you're from, how old you are.
I'm Thomas Fackrell. I was born in Sandy, Utah. I am 27 years old. I am the fifth of 9 children. There are 2 sets of twins in the family, and I'm part of the younger set, but I am the older of the 2 of us. And we're not identical. People have had us both in the same room and asked us that, and we look very different. But
perfect introduction to your childhood. So tell us what it was like growing up in such a big family and what part religion played in your childhood.
Yeah. So being raised in the church, I was born in the covenant. It was everything I dreamed it could be. It was wonderful, honestly. I actually did a bit of research coming into this because I wanted to be able to speak to my Mormon roots correctly. And so I did some family history research, and I'm a fifth generation Mormon, Utah Mormon, on both my dad's side and my mom's side up various lines. And there were 5 different cases of polygamy I was able to count. But in all cases, I came from the first wife. So I can't say I'm a product of polygamy, fortunately. But that's just to give context for, it's a multi-generational family within the church, and it's always been very important. We always went to church, completely active. There was never a question of our commitment and activity in the church. My grandpa, actually, who I am named after, in fact, he was a temple sealer. And my grandma was she would always do family history and provide us the names to go to the temple. And they lived right next door to us. And then on the other side of our house was my cousins, my mom's sister. And then like across the street was my mom's other sister. And so it's just cousins, and we were all active in the church. And then across the street was the church. So we lived in a lane. So it's the lane. That was our household area, like where we grew up, and then the church was across the street. And that was my life. It was growing up. We had family home evenings. We would recite articles of faith. We would go to all the church activities, and sometimes we'd go to a general conference. We would read the Book of Mormon in the car up to my cousin's cabin, just very, very enmeshed in the church. It was our ethnic and cultural identity. It was everything for us.
All right. So raised in a big family, long lines of LDS people around a lot of your family, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. Okay, so were you baptized at 8?
Yes, I was. Yes, I was, having 4 older siblings who had already been baptized and many cousins and friends. It was something I was looking forward to for a long time, even since before I was 8. It was something I knew that when you get baptized, that's when all your sins are washed away and you're finally clean and you're also like a big kid now. That's how I saw it. So
All of your sins at 8 years old, right?
yes, every last one of them. I had one cousin. My mom, she came from a family of 10 children. Also like born and raised Utah, Mormon, and so lots of cousins on one side, 60 cousins on one side, and actually no cousins on my dad's side. He was the only one of his brothers who got married. So very lopsided. So that's why we had so many different cousin baptisms we would go to. And I remember at one, a cousin got baptized, and I remember going up to him and I'm like, okay, now don't make any mistakes because like you're clean now, like kind of like joking, but but it's like, I mean, they're 8 years old. So like how many sins do they like? Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, as far as like my understanding, of baptism, it was, a rite of passage. I wanted to follow Jesus. I wanted to do what was right. It was really important to me to make sure I was doing everything right. I did not like getting in trouble. And I didn't feel pressured, though, by my family or by my parents to get baptized. It was genuinely, like, intrinsically the desire I had to follow Jesus, follow his example, and just be a good kid. And in my growing up context, that included being baptized.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so let's transition into your teenage years. So when you're a young man in the church, the culture plays a huge part of growing up and kind of shapes you. What was that like for you?
Well, I must say, as a rule follower, I definitely derived a lot of my identity and self-esteem even from my ability to follow the rules. I would probably have said like follow the prophet, follow the iron rod, and just do what was right. Choose the right, CTR, right? Right? Not close the refrigerator, but choose the right. That's
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, I think there are more out there. Current Temple Recommend is the other one I've heard.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, there you go. But I was very big on doing all of the programs that the church had. So like when I was younger, it was Faith in God booklet. And they have literal check boxes that you get to check off. And it was so satisfying to be able to do that.
I loved those little booklets.
It was nice. You felt
Right?
good about yourself.
Yep.
Like I'm following what's expected of me. This feels good. Has a picture of the temple on the front.
Yes.
And then once you advance past the faith in God, I think for the young boys, it was duty to God after. And they have 3 different versions, right? For the deacon, teacher, and priest. And I advanced through all of them. And I was very happy to. And my parents didn't even have to nag me. I just wanted to do it myself because it just felt so good to be good. That's honestly how I felt. And with Boy Scouts, like, getting all the merit badges, I think I don't know why I treated it like it was a race, but like I got my Eagle Scout by the time I was 13. But like, let's be real. It was like my mom got my Eagle Scout for me by the time I was 13.
It's the story of every young man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Thanks, Mom. Eagle Scout. I still have the card. I was going through some stuff yesterday. I have the card. It has my name on it, and I am an Eagle Scout. I don't carry it with me. I haven't had a need to do that yet. There are probably some among us out there who have those Eagle Scout cards.
Nice.
So yeah, loved camping, loved going on those campouts. But specifically, in the church, it was very like, it was almost like an extension of our home because we grew up like right across the street from the church. So we would always I loved like riding scooters and skateboards around the church. They had, the slopes that I could go down. There's a nice wall that on the church that you could either rock climb up or you could throw the lacrosse ball against it. And there was a broken window at one point from me playing with my brother's lacrosse ball and the church window. But it was just like our playground, I guess. But like we were reverent about it because like my grandpa wouldn't like tolerate us being irreverent about the church. So he taught us to have respect for it, but it was also like our play place, like going behind the areas of they have like the gated section on the exterior where like the air coolers are, like different things. And like sometimes we get in there and like, I probably shouldn't admit this, but like we would climb up the bars and like get on the roof and just like play around. Like we just had fun. And like we weren't trying to cause trouble. Maybe some cousins I had were into that more than I was, but we would, so as it pertains to actually like spiritual stuff though, so going to church, I and my brothers, we always like were very like happy to serve in the priesthood. And we would always be the ones passing the sacrament. There was always at least one Fackrell boy on the bench every Sunday morning. And if they didn't bring bread for the sacrament, since we lived so close, it'd be like, hey, go run home, go grab a loaf of bread. And we would do that. It was just so easy to be in that position to serve. And I really enjoyed it. And like, yeah, it was, and I guess even like the way we would read the sacrament prayers, I don't know. There are so many different opportunities we had for like, for me to build up my ego from participating in the church in this way. Cause like people would be like, oh, the way you say the sacrament prayer, they should record your voice for like the temple. And I'm like,
What?
Cause it's a recording in the temple. And so they're like, they should just record the sacrament prayers and play them on tape. And then they don't have to repeat them when they say them wrong. They can just push play and listen to it.
What?
That was a funny guy in my ward who suggested
that's
that.
funny.
But yeah, very big, very active in the church, always go to mutual, all the activities. And I derived a lot of, like I said earlier, just self-esteem from that. It felt good to be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there is value in being raised in a community that is supposedly supposed to be teaching you to be good and to have morals and all those things. And so I think it's important that we pinpoint that there are good things that came from us being raised in the church. We're not just here to bash the church, even though I'm criticized of that a lot. We want to see the good and the bad. And that's awesome. Your childhood is very similar to my childhood. So I relate a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was your understanding of Jesus Christ when you were a teenager, young man, growing up? What kind of a relationship did you have with the Savior at the time?
Yeah, well, okay, you have the head and the heart, right? So in my head, I knew a lot about Jesus, or so I thought. I loved to learn. And so whenever there was something new to learn about Jesus, I would pay special attention. But as far as like on the heart level, like a relationship with him was not something that I even knew was possible for a really long time. But there were stages that I went through as I got older. And so it started out where, and I noticed these stages advance through the years, particularly in how I would bear my testimony. And as a kid, the right things to say. I know the church is true. I know Joseph Smith translated the Book of Mormon. I know fill in the blank is the current prophet. And like, I bear my testimony, right? And I know Jesus is my Savior. I know Jesus died for me. That's the one. So I would say that. And then I think as I thought about it more growing up, I'm like, wait a second, like Jesus died for me, but he also lived for me. Okay. And that was kind of a neat insight that I had. Over time though, it was like, okay, Jesus not only lived for me, like he lives for me. And it took a while to get to that point, but it was more like the relationship with him was usually more overshadowed by an intellectual understanding of who he was and what he did. So it's like, I watched those, the seminary videos or Boyd K. Packer's explaining the purpose of the atonement and how it's a sacrifice and it pays for our sins. And like there was some people would quote scriptures. I remember one of my brothers, he's like, yeah, so when Jesus died, he shed his blood. And that's why, because he didn't have blood in him anymore. Scriptures say flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, but Jesus shed his blood, and that's why he could inherit the kingdom of God. And who knows how accurate that interpretation is, but I remember that being one thing where it's like, I cling to that because it was like, ooh, fascinating, like gee whiz. So very, very, big in learning about Jesus. But it took a while to develop that relationship. And so I will say, though, one of the phases of developing that relationship with him was learning what repentance is all about. Because I, as a kid who liked to do my best to do what was right, I was also very hard on myself. And when I made mistakes, I was very self-critical. And, never to the point of religious scrupulosity, I think is the word, where it's almost a religious OCD. It didn't get that bad for me. At least I don't think. Maybe it did, and I just have a hard time admitting it. But when I was younger and I would make mistakes and I would sin, I was really hard on myself. Because especially even like when I was 13, I got my patriarchal blessing, okay? And in it, there was a line that says, be warned. Like it was a warning, so pay attention. And the warning said, like, you cannot hide your thoughts or actions from the Lord. And that was like kind of scary because like I didn't want my mistakes to be seen or exposed. And it's not because I don't know, was I afraid? I had so much fear about like going to see the bishop if I did anything wrong. That was really scary. And so I thought, well, I don't want to do that because that's like shameful. If I've done anything wrong, I don't want to have to go to the bishop. So I guess if he doesn't know, then I don't have to. And I think I extended that a little bit to my relationship with God. And that's why I was given that warning in my patriarchal blessing. So anyway, so there were some mistakes I had made as a teenager where it was eating me alive inside. And I just couldn't like feel worthy, even though I had a temple recommend. And I remember one time I had a really good bishop who I came to him with these struggles I was having. It was my first time, like, I need to go talk to a bishop. Like, I don't even know if I've done anything that requires that I go to the bishop's office. I just don't even know. And I'm scared that I'm like keeping it from God because I have this warning in my patriarchal blessing. And so I just to be sure, I'm going to go to the bishop's office. I'm going to talk to him and make sure I'm good. Never mind just praying to God and asking him how he feels about me. But yes, so I had to go to the judge of Israel to just determine whether I was worthy. But thankfully, it actually turned out to be a really good experience because he was very loving and he had me turn to the book of Enos, which if there's a Book of Mormon here, I'll just turn to it right now. Mm-hmm. Let's see, Enos, Jeremiah, there it is. Okay. And he said, okay, Thomas, because my question was basically, how do I know if I'm worthy? How do I know if my sins have been forgiven? And he said, this is how you know. And he handed me the book of Enos, chapter 1 and only chapter, verse 5. It says, and there came a voice unto me saying, Enos, thy sins are forgiven. Thy sins are forgiven thee, and thou shalt be blessed. And I, Enos, knew that God could not lie. Wherefore my guilt was swept away. And I said, Lord, how is it done? And he said unto me, and this is where my bishop paused, because I was like getting emotional at this point. And he's like, Thomas, your sins have been forgiven. And I was having a really hard time believing that Jesus could forgive me of my sins. I believed he could forgive other people, but I just wasn't sure like if I like deserved it. But my bishop's telling me, okay, you've been forgiven. And I'm basically having the same question that Enos has here, where in verse 7, and I said, Lord, how is it done? And then my bishop had me read this next verse. And he said unto me, because of thy faith in Christ, whom thou hast never before heard nor seen. And he cut me off there before the verse could end. And I remember I was just like crying in his office because it finally clicked for me that I just had to trust Jesus, that he would forgive me of my sins. And ever since that experience, I had a newfound confidence in the power of the atonement and in Christ's just forgiveness. So that really kind of opened the next phase where my testimony shifted from like he died for me to like he lived and he lives for me.
That's beautiful. I think we have a lack of understanding of the atonement and how it works because we have a lack of understanding of the character of God because we've been taught for so long to go through man to reach God. That's where we're seeing these young people who have these worthiness complex type things. I had the exact same thing. And it wasn't until I learned of the character of God that I was able to see it's that simple. Have faith on his name, follow him the best you can, always be talking to him. He's always there. We can approach him with anything. It's so simple. But it takes a lot to learn that when we've been taught we have to go through these men to get that.
Yeah. And I think that was a pattern growing up where there was so much uncertainty about like, am I good, God? Like, am I doing okay? And because everything's measured externally, and there's these benchmarks of worthiness that are determined by men. And even when you meet them, like for me, speaking for myself, I still had the self-doubt of like, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I good? Because I've read the Sermon on the Mount. I know I don't have pure thoughts all the time, or maybe I said this rude thing to my sibling, but like that's not on the Temple Recommend interviews. But like, why not? Like we're supposed to be like loving, but so there was a lot of confusion about like what constituted worthiness. And I remember like how do I know if I'm being led by the Spirit? That was always so hard to know growing up. And honestly, like God was distant in this way. It was really hard to believe that he was close.
Yeah, definitely. I think we see that in a lot of, that's a pattern in the church. So let's continue your story and we'll get into this even more, I'm sure, and all the things you've learned. So let's transition to, did you serve a mission?
I did serve a mission.
Okay. Tell us about that process, what made you decide, and a little bit about your mission.
Yes. So before I jump into the mission, though, I do need to give a little bit more context because while I did have this experience with my bishop, and so I learned like, okay, the atonement is real. Jesus is here to forgive. And as many times as my people repent, well, I forgive them. But I had, so I went to, okay, this is a bit of a story. It's a backstory leading to my mission.
All right.
So when I was 16 years old, I got to go to a BYU sports camp. And I did diving, like springboard diving. I was into the acrobatics. A lot of fun. Wished I had more friends who would do it with me, but it was scary, and it was scary for me too. But anyway, I go to this camp, and it's kind of like EFY, where they encourage a lot of like mingling, and they have dances, and it's just like tons of fun. And I remember at one of the dances, there was, they turn on the slow song, and okay, now's my chance. I got to scope out the cutest girl I can find. And I find the one. Okay, there she is. And I go up, and I the guys are like hanging out together. The girls, they stay in their little huddles, little Maya-made huddles or whatever, however old they were. And it's like,
huddles.
It's like, how can I get through here? And so, yes, I had to go deep within me to have the courage to just like break through that huddle and single this girl out to ask her like, hey, will you dance with me? And so we danced. It was just fun, if those young feelings when you get to experience that. And after the camp, we stayed in touch. And because I thought, okay, like, because I really studied my scriptures. I had a habit of reading the Book of Mormon I read it for the first time maybe when I was like 13 and loved it, knew it was true, that I just was kind of born with believing blood when it came to that. And had read the Book of Mormon Reader as a kid and had knelt and prayed about that when I finished it and got what I felt was a confirmation from the Spirit that it was true. So when I was older and I read the regular Book of Mormon, it's like, yeah, of course this is true. How could it not be? Anyway, so I had that habit of reading the scriptures. And one time when I was studying Doctrine and Covenants as a teenager, I got a really strong impression that like celestial marriage, don't fully understand what it is, but I got this impression that what we do in this life has a direct impact on where we end up in the next life. And that was like, whoosh, that just came on me so strong one day when I was reading my scriptures that I was just I tried to have an eternal perspective a lot as a teenager. I had some friends tell me like, you're kind of a serious dude, Thomas. Like you're way too serious, in fact. But I was just being myself. I don't know. I just took things seriously. So with this mindset of kind of what I thought at the time was like an eternal perspective, right? I thought that, getting married in the temple, that's like the ultimate pinnacle of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's going to be very relatable if you're raised in the LDS church. Get to the temple. So I had that instilled in me from a very young age. And anyway, so going to this sports camp and meeting this girl, it's like, all right, I'm still planning out my life of like, how am I going to get to the temple? this girl seems awesome. Maybe, just maybe, if I like can start something and cultivate it until like after my mission, like she could be my eternal companion. And see, I was a hopeless romantic as this teenager. And so we like I downloaded Snapchat for her. It was never anything inappropriate. But because I didn't like that app, but I downloaded it for her so that we could like Snapchat and text and call all through my 16th year. I guess, well, I was 16 years old. I guess technically that's my 17th year. But we stayed in touch, and I developed a condition, you could say, related to this relationship, because it wasn't actually a relationship. She lived in a different state, and I was in Utah, but like we would like show verbal affection, and like we really wanted to be together, you know, like it's like puppy love basically.
Mm-hmm.
But I developed kind of almost a depressive attitude about it, because like she would be like my first thought when I wake up in the morning, my last thought at night, but like alongside my desire to follow Christ and follow the gospel. But after a year of it, I was just so like heartbroken and just weary from it. It was so hard to reach for something in my heart that I could not have. It just wasn't healthy. And it almost became intrusive, the thoughts of like pining after this outcome, this reality that couldn't exist. And that was just so hard to deal with. And finally, I remember watching General Conference, and there was a quote, I think it's in Preach My Gospel now, but it said, "Anything that is unfair about this life can be made right through the atonement of Jesus Christ." And I hung to that. And after a year of this just like emotional, just pining and never being able to find what I thought would like make me happy, because it was lined up with what I thought was my eternal purpose, right? The eventual temple marriage. It just wasn't working. And I was so confused, because it's like, God, I'm doing everything you want me to. I'm checking the boxes. Why isn't the universe conspiring to do things for my good?
About a girl you met when you were 16.
Exactly.
That's so funny.
So I thought, life is sure unfair. Life is unfair. And it's fun. It's like, and I can laugh about it now, but like, this was my world back then. And it was.
Life is so funny when we're 16. I was no different, to be honest. Like, I had very similar story in my life. So that's why it's funny.
Yeah. And so it really is funny. But the posture of my heart in that scenario was that there was one last ditch effort when my family was going to California where she lived, and like we were going to be close to where she lived, and I tried to coordinate with her, like, okay, well, we're staying at this cabin. My sister-in-law, my sister's in-laws have a cabin up there. We stayed there, and I was like very spiritual and contemplative. I'm like reading Joseph F. Smith's like Doctrines of the Kingdom, and like, or what was it? Like, yeah, I think it was that book. I was all into that stuff. I'm like, I'm just doing everything I can to do right, God. Like, can you please just make this work out? Spoiler, it didn't work out. It didn't get to see her. So I go home for this trip. I'm just devastated. It's just the culmination of a year of just like heartbreak and just like, oh, it was so bad. And so I'm in my bedroom that night, after coming home, and I'm just like, life is so unfair. But this quote from General Conference comes to my mind, that all that is unfair about life can be made right through the atonement of Christ. And I'm reflecting on that, and I basically like petitioned God. I'm like, if that's true, I'd like to see some proof, because this feels really unfair right now. And so he responded, to my surprise. And just in my mind, in my heart, it was just, the information was communicated to me. It was conveyed on my heart. It's like, okay, Thomas, let go of this girl. I'm like, oh.
You're like, no way.
I'm like, no, like, this is my identity. I am going to have a temple marriage with this person that I picked out. And like, this is the covenant path. Like, how can you tell me to not stay on this path, God? And so, I'm like fearing this dread inside my heart of like, this is who I am and my identity. How can I let go of this? And God's like, I mean, the mental image might be like folding arms, like tapping his foot, like, come on, like, you know better. Like, I'm like, okay. And I'm like, okay, remember, I like doing diving, right? So I know how to jump off stuff. And that's what I felt like he was asking me to do, to just hurl myself over this cliff into the abyss and leave behind this identity. And it literally felt that dramatic. I know everything's dramatic when you're 16,
right?
But that's what it felt like. And so I kneel down and I am having the wrestle of my life in my heart. And I'm just trembling and I just like, oh, okay. And I say the prayer. I say, God, I am moving on. I'm giving up on this dream. And it was like someone turned on a light switch right there in my bedroom. From head to toe, I was just filled with the warm sensation of God's love. It was like electricity through my entire body as an immediate response to this prayer of him giving my will to him. And it was so overwhelming. It was like, because it was such a flip-flop. I was so just in anguish over this, and he had me pray to give this up to him that I was so attached to, this identity. And as soon as I did, boom, I am encircled about with the arms of his love, just like Nephi said happened to him. So now when I read that, ever since then, I read that and it's like, I know what that's talking about. I felt that. That's real. And so there in my room, I'm filled with the love of God, and it just like tears from mourning to rejoicing just instantly. And I'm just glowing, just joyful and happy and just feeling God's love for me like I've never, ever felt before. Just completely consumed by it. But that wasn't the end of what happened, because there was intelligence conveyed with it too, with the experience. And it was a bit of an emotional roller coaster, because what he said to me after this being filled with his love, he spoke to me by reminding me of certain scriptures that I had been studying. And he has a way of doing that. He will bring scriptures to our mind to impress certain messages upon us, right? And so the message that he told me there after filling me with his love was, Thomas, the Son of Man has descended below all things. Art thou greater than he? You know, from Doctrine and Covenants, when Joseph Smith was in the jail. That was humbling. He told that to me, and I was like, oh my goodness. And I thought I had it hard. He went through so much more than I ever will go through. And then I almost kind of started feeling guilty. I felt so sad for him because of how much he had gone through. And here I am, just some like suburban white boy, just like heartsick over some girl. And here Jesus has gone through so much more. Oh, but there I am anyway, in my room. And I'm feeling like, feeling all this sorrow for my Savior. But he told me that, like, but Thomas, I know what you're feeling. I know what you're feeling because I felt it all. And he said, because of what you are going through, that suffering, it is a small, small part of what I experienced in the garden. And the degree to which you experience or comprehend the suffering that life brings, you're becoming more like me. You can't go around it, you gotta go through it, right? And so after I heard him say that to me, it was just like the joy was back, because it's like, oh my goodness, like this is the path. This is the path that God has us on. And he's just confirmed to me that like, I'm on the path. And so, I walked out of my bedroom and I'm like looking into the bathroom mirror and I'm just like tears, just goofily smiling. And I was so elevated and just edified from the whole experience. And it was amazing. It was wonderful. So, looking back on that, I do believe that that's what the scriptures refer to as the baptism of fire and the Holy Ghost. I had no way of categorically understanding it to be that at the time because, I was confirmed at 8 years old. I had no way of knowing any differently. But Jesus became real to me after that day. Yeah, going to priest's quorum, just kind of on fire for Jesus. Like, wait a second. Jesus and his atonement, like that's not just like another principle of the gospel. Like he's everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is so awesome. Okay, so how did that carry into your mission then? Because you're on fire for Jesus. Is that going to carry into your mission then?
Well, see, yes, but being the kind of intellectual oriented person that I am, I was very, very good at mentally defending the structure of the church. Mm-hmm. And so like the church building could have been on fire and like just because the bishop set it on fire and I would have been like, everything's fine. Like we still have the keys of the priesthood. Like do not panic. And like, no matter what happens, like, and even if like you have a problem with the church, like deal with it. Like we have the keys. What are you going to do? Like,
deal with it. So many people say that to us now though, don't they?
I mean, it's a common perspective, but
for sure.
can't blame them. That's how I always felt.
We've been there. Like, yeah.
Yes. Definitely saw myself as a defender of the truth. Mm-hmm. And so while I'm having on the one hand, these experiences with Jesus and like, I wouldn't have even described it that way though at the time. I would have just said, I felt the love of God. Haven't you? Like, I just kind of assumed that this is something people had experienced. Mm-hmm. And I would often like feel it again when we would sing hymns, especially about Jesus. I would feel the Spirit very, very strongly that like similar to things I had felt in the past with his love. So going into my mission though, it was still just kind of like, okay, covenant path, duty. It's like, are you going to go on a mission? It's like, well, of course I'm going to go on a mission. God expects it of me. Like, do I really have a choice? Like, but I didn't resent that either. I was happy to serve a mission. It was my privilege. I have the restored gospel. We have the fullness of the gospel. We have the Book of Mormon. We have the keys of the priesthood. It is my privilege to go out and share that with the world because I've been blessed so much. So I honestly didn't know how to make sense of anything like wrong in the church because I don't think I actually let myself see anything wrong. Because that experience I had like my experience with the Book of Mormon all growing up and my experience with in the bishop's office as a teenager and with Jesus in my bedroom that night, like, of course, I'm just going to lump it all into one big basket and say the church is true because of what I've experienced. And I mean, that can be difficult to then, parse apart like, okay, well, technically, like logically, this experience being true doesn't mean this thing over here is true, right? Took me a long time to parse that apart because I was just used to lumping it all together. So I went into my mission with that same understanding. But I was also like really still kind of hard on myself. I started my mission. So I was called to Brisbane, Australia, and I was assigned Chinese speaking. And yeah,
that so hard? Holy
It was so hard. I went from being like 4.0, like top of the class high school kid to I even graduated 3 months early because not because I'm like so smart, but because they lowered the age for missionaries to 18 years old.
Oh yeah.
And I was going to turn 18 during my senior year towards the last like 70%, the last third of that school year. And my high school didn't do quarters, they did trimesters. Mm-hmm. So after the second trimester, I could just like do a few online classes and cram enough like high school credits in. If I could, then I could graduate one trimester early around March. Mm-hmm. So I did that for my senior year. Didn't even like walk at graduation because I turned 18 in March, so I'm going on a mission in March.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were dedicated.
Extremely dedicated.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So I went through the temple that in March of 2015 is when I went through the temple, and I got ready for my mission. I'd studied so intently for the temple. I'd read like Hugh Nibley's book, like this big, about the temple. I just like wanted to comprehend it because it contains the fullness of the gospel. Is that right? And so I needed to understand it. So I did everything I could to prepare for it. And I had older siblings who were like, yeah, Thomas, you're not going to be surprised at all when you go through the temple. I'm like, oh, okay. I was still.
Yeah. Whoever says you're not surprised, like, what?
And I don't need to dwell on this too much necessarily, but I will say I do remember coming back from the temple, and my whole family was there, and I love my family, so it was a very spiritual experience. But I also do remember feeling a little bit betrayed by God, in the sense that I didn't know how to comprehend that there were these essential elements of my salvation that were kept from me my whole life. It's like, that was really hard to grapple with.
Mm-hmm.
It's like having a friend who has kept a secret from you, and it's like, finally you learn the secret, and it's like, wait, were you really my friend? Why aren't you telling me these things? But of course I found a way to mental gymnastics out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that wore off quick.
Yep.
I served my mission. I went to the MTC. Oh, anyway, so coming from high achiever high school, right? Come to the MTC and they try to teach me Chinese, and I'm not getting it on day one.
Oh, snap. Now you're unworthy, Thomas.
Pretty much.
Oh my goodness.
Well, it's like, if this is I'm supposed to have the gift of tongues, okay? I'm supposed to be able to learn this language.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And so when I wasn't, after a week of studying Chinese, and I can barely introduce myself, and I can't even read the Romanized Chinese script, the pinyin, can't even pronounce it. And I'm just so overwhelmed. So I'm just breaking down, this is so hard. And in the MTC, they're teaching us how to invite people to be baptized in Chinese. And I'm like, how are we supposed to invite people to be baptized in Chinese if I can't even introduce myself? This makes no sense. And my MTC teacher is Fang Zhang Lao, Elder Fackrell, where's your faith?
Oh my God.
I had a hard time, especially with other missionaries who I was like, why are you here? And not in a
Why are you here?
What are you doing here? This isn't high school. This isn't EFY. This is the Lord's kingdom, and we are called to preach his gospel. And I was a little extreme. And that some other missionaries, I can see why they had a hard time getting along with me. I wouldn't fight with them, but it's oh, there goes Mr. Holier than thou, elder. I know why they thought that at this time.
Right.
It's guys, I'm just trying to do my best here. I don't know. So I understand, and I think they learned eventually, some of the other companions I had, that oh, you don't think you're better than everyone.
It's actually a complex where we don't think that we're enough. That's it.
It's that simple.
Yep. Uh-huh.
It's that simple. Yeah. So I remember before I got on my mission, I had no idea what my mission was going to be like. It's okay, this is the Green Berets of the Lord's his force. I don't know. And we're the front line, first defense of the church and bringing people into the Lord's kingdom. And so I took it super seriously. But when I got to my mission, okay, I was still struggling to learn Chinese. And I had pretty strong situational anxiety because of it. Because I was really, I just had such high expectations for myself, and assumed that I'd be getting all these gifts of the Spirit to help me be a good missionary. And I was I didn't feel any of that. But I was really pushing myself hard and praying to God. I had a lot of tearful prayers where it's God, please help me. And he showed up, and he would comfort me in those moments, but I couldn't get over this misconception I had about his character and his expectations on me. And it was maybe 3 months into my mission. My poor companion, he had to put up with me, my trainer. I was a basket case, because I was always just I would not every night, but like so often I would stress myself out so much that I would be reduced to tears, like because I didn't want to mess up. Like it was like, who's putting this pressure on me? Like the mission wasn't, I was doing it to myself. So a lot of patience in this companion. I bless him for what he put up with. But yeah, it was hard. God saved me though from this mentality. And he used a scripture that not many people turn to for comfort. But surprisingly, I just kind of think about things weird sometimes. It worked for me. I think it's King Benjamin, when he's talking about like how much God has done for us and how like we rely on him for every breath and everything. And I was reading the scripture in one of my morning studies. And now for one more bit of context, I do remember like vividly out in the streets of Australia, door knocking, or no, maybe it was walking back from the bus stop because we preached in the city, and so we'd catch the bus. Coming back to our apartment one night, it's weird. It was almost like I felt like in the sky there were like these words superimposed up on the sky, like they weren't really there, but this is like the emotional state I was in, where it's like they said, "You're not good enough." Just there. So it's like, I can't escape it because every time you look up, you see the whole sky. And like, that's what I felt was just huge in the sky. You're not good enough. And so, yes, extreme anxiety over that fact for months as a missionary until King Benjamin says that if you were to serve God with your whole heart, mind, might, everything you have, all your days, you would still be an unprofitable servant. And when I read that, it was like a light bulb went off because it's like, there is no standard that I'm supposed to reach. I'm never going to be profitable. I'm always going to be unprofitable. Therefore, here's my logic mind. Therefore, God didn't call me to make a profit. So if I don't feel profitable, that's okay. It's okay. And it was like this huge burden was lifted off of me, and I could finally start enjoying the mission. I could feel the spirit again. Like I could feel good again. But man, like, so Book of Mormon coming in strong, saving me from that. Like it saved me before it saved me again. So
that's awesome. Well, I think that the Book of Mormon does that a lot in our lives. It's like you open to scriptures that sometimes I'm like, I swear God put that in there just for me, right?
Yeah.
There are moments that we all need that. So that's awesome.
Yeah. So I definitely had a sense of like, okay, God's with me. It was still really lonely. Like it's traumatic being away from family, isolated. It's hard. But had plenty of good experiences too. I really treasured my mission. Did not love that we cared so much about the numbers. How many people can we baptize? Like that was hard. And I was probably like afraid of my mission president because I wanted to impress him. Because I assumed, right? Because the hierarchy we're built within the church, it's like, I assumed that this man's closer to God than me. And so I really wanted to be, assigned a place in the mission where I could be close to him. Like I didn't need to be the assistant to the president, but like he does have office elders. And maybe if I get called into that, then I could spend enough time with him, then I could learn more of the secrets of the kingdom and like become closer to Jesus by knowing him better. But I do remember one time we were proselyting out in the streets of the outdoor mall, and he was for some reason just checking in on our like teaching center. We had like an office space in this downtown area where we would bring our investigators to teach them. And one time I just saw him walking on the street on his way to that office as just a surprise. And of course we like idolize our leaders. And so it's like, like I saw him and I was like, I like straightened my spine and I'm like, okay, I need to be talking to someone right now. And they was like, that was scary. Like, of course he didn't like mean to do any of this, but like that was just a perception. And yeah, I even had one companion. He told me one time that like, Elder Fackrell, you kind of remind me of our mission president. And I took so much pride in that actually at the time. But now looking back, I'm like, I don't know if that was a compliment.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, the mission was the mission. honestly, the hardest part is dealing with companions. That's feeling like I'm babysitting, like managing people's relationships, yeah.
Yep. Common story.
Yeah, common experience, but yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's transition. So mission is over. You come home. What do you do next? College, job, singles wards. Tell me about those things.
Yeah, straight into the singles ward. I had this experience at 17 years old, which was like, okay, give up this covenant path identity, but I didn't know that that's what was being asked of me. I thought it was just this girl, right?
Right.
And in a sense, I was giving my will to God, right? And I was seriously willing to sacrifice whatever he asked, but with being within the construct of the church, it was hard to understand, like, what is God really asking of me versus, what the leadership is asking of me. It's all the same in my mind. It's like, oh, it's all from God. So how much was I really sacrificing at different points in my life? It was confusing to know, and I don't know. But when I got back from my mission, I had gotten a girlfriend before leaving on my mission, and she'd waited for me.
She waited the whole time?
Well, up until the very end.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And
that
then,
makes more sense.
But she dumped him to give me another chance when I got home.
Oh.
So it was an emotional roller coaster.
Okay.
Yeah, it was rough. So yes, when I got home, my summer was spent salvaging that relationship, trying to prepare for the temple, right? Because mission is over, check that box, onto the temple.
Okay, so she broke up with you while you were on the mission. And
No, she didn't break up with me.
What?
She didn't tell me.
The story gets worse.
No, it was like literally a month before I got home, and then she got a boyfriend, and then she dumped him because she felt bad, and she didn't tell me because she didn't want to distract me. She didn't want to distract me on my last month of the mission. So.
Okay, so you got home, and then did she tell you?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I found out.
That's good. Did you find out through her?
I can't actually remember if it was through her or my little sister.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I had a little bit of betrayal trauma for a bit, I think, because of that. But I got over it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
And then right when we got to a point where our relationship was like good on stable ground again, she decided she wanted to serve a mission.
Oh. That makes it worse.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and that was right about the time I was starting BYU. So I had gotten admitted to BYU before I left on my mission. I had all my ducks in a row. I was ready, ready to go. So anyway, I spent this summer trying to get this relationship to go, and then it doesn't go where I'm hoping it will go. I was so confused too, because it's like, I'm like reading all these general authority quotes that are like, temple marriage is so important. And like, if a young woman wants to like serve God, like she should serve him by getting married instead of like, it was bad. It was bad because I didn't know what to think. And I'm just like so confused. Oh, it was bad. But like, I don't think I was that guy who's like, marriage is more important than a mission. I was like, I'm not going to get in the way if this is what you feel is right.
That's good.
So,
that is good. Okay, so she went on a mission, and
Yes.
where did that leave you? Did you guys stay together?
Well, I didn't want to let go of what I had worked so hard to cultivate, so I waited for her.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Ping pong. So I'm at BYU, right? What's supposed to be like the glory days of any young YSA. And I am just like, my heart is locked. I don't want to see anyone. And I'm just like, just socially isolated and not happy. I was heartbroken again. And so that was hard. My first few semesters at BYU were really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, as it pertained to church stuff, as it pertained to the gospel church stuff, I was still like doing my best to study the scriptures and stay as close to God as I knew how. But those YSA wards in BYU, they are another thing.
Will you tell us about that? What do you mean by that?
Oh, it's so weird. Like you show up and it's just a bunch of people your same age, right?
Yep.
But it's like people are here trying to scope out like who they're going to go on a date with next. And some people are like fresh out of high school. Some are like RM. So you kind of already have this caste system where you don't really mingle between the two. And so, and like maybe there are some guys who like want to take out the fresh out of high school girls and just to have a good time. And then it's like, they know they're going to go on a mission and they don't really care. And it's just like I'm not about that. So I'm not going to, I already have my heart locked on this missionary girl anyway. So but it just felt like this was just this cultural, like, we're just here because this is what people do down here. And it wasn't really about Jesus.
Right.
Sadly, and there were people there, I'm sure, who were there for Jesus, but like the majority of what it felt like was just like this factory of like, okay, this ward's meeting at this multi-purpose room at this time, and like, okay, next one, get them out, next one in, and it's just so many groups of YSA wards, and it's just kind of weird.
Yes.
I felt that way when I was there, for clarification.
That's how I felt going to singles wards too. So it's
And like every single week, it's like, all right, elders, like in Elders Quorum, it's like, all right, today we're gonna have another lesson on pornography.
Wait, really?
Basically.
Wait, really? That's funny. When I was going to singles wards, that was like, nobody talks about that.
Well,
we don't talk about that ever.
It's like they talked about it, but they didn't. It was like, this
Interesting.
shouldn't be happening. We need to have chastity. So like, but no one would like talk about their struggles. It was usually like the bishop or someone like, we need to talk about this because he's getting all these interviews on the side with people confessing this struggle they're having. And so that was just like a common recurring thing, I guess.
Interesting.
But like, I'm sure it's rampant down there, and like not just there, but like thankfully that was never really something that I had to face. And I don't know how I was blessed in that way, and God protected me, honestly, in that way, that it's not something that I ever had to wrestle with. Like, I know like 90% of men and young men do wrestle with. So I had like empathy for that. And I mean, I had seen some inappropriate stuff before. It's not like I was completely isolated. You can't avoid it.
No.
Yeah. But I do feel like God protected me. And I really did try hard, though, to fill my life with light all through my teenage years and then after my mission, too. But anyway, yeah, it was just hard to feel like an authentic relationship with Jesus Christ was prioritized in those BYU wards. It was kind of like birds showing their feathers for mating dances. You know, like who can wear the coolest tie? Who can give the best testimony? Like I can only speak for the men, at least. It's like, how many dates can you go on? I don't know.
All right. So what was that like for you while you're locked into this missionary girl? Did you wait for her whole mission?
No.
Oh, okay. So what happened?
Well, so I have these multiple motives, right, at BYU. It's like, okay, I gotta like prepare myself for the temple when I get sealed. That's still the ultimate goal. But I also, like, part of becoming a man and a husband is being a provider. So I'm at BYU so that I can get an education which will enable me to get an occupation to pay for a family and to provide. And so I was very stressed out about that. Naturally, problems that are, however many years down the road, I'm somehow finding a way to stress myself about it right now. And so at BYU, I was very stressed about that. And I thought, how can I earn as much money as possible? So I was like getting ready to do summer sales.
Every BYU student does summer sales. You meet a guy in a singles war, he's like, I do summer sales. Do you sell pesticide or home security system?
It was going to be pest control. And so I'm like in communication with someone who like served in the same mission as my older brother. So it's like, okay, there's a family connection. And it's like, dude, we're going to make so much money. And like, not everyone does pest control sales for the same reasons. I'll just put it that way. There are some people with pure hearts who get into that stuff. No, seriously, like there are good people who do it, but like
they have pure hearts but toxic bodies because they're selling pesticide. Anyway.
But I got sucked into it, and oh man, it was weird. They like put on this pump up rally thing, this event like up in like some auditorium at like Weber State University of all these BYU kids that are like trying to get to start this new pest control company, because it's like it's the same as like MLMs or other things. Like you need to get in early to get as many people underneath you in the pyramid to earn as much money. So that's why there's always a new pest control company every year. So it was this brand new pest control company that's recruiting us and like, you got to recruit all your friends because you'll make so much money if you. Anyway, it just became clear that it was like super just greedy. Like the drive and the motive for it was just greed. And it was kind of scary, honestly, going to this like rally where like people are freaking out about money.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was like almost like they were possessed, and like it was kind of scary. At least possessed with the spirit of greed. And not everyone who does direct sales is a greedy person. I need to make that clear. I know there are good people out there. It's okay to be a salesperson. Jacob Isbell, do not hurt me. Just kidding, Jacob. So I couldn't do that anyway. I came to the conclusion, this is not for me. Even though I did a lot of door knocking in Australia, it's like, this is not for me. It took me a couple months of like being trained by them to come to the realization that like, I'm really stressed out about this. I don't feel good about this. So it was over a winter break. I was at a cabin up in Park City, and I felt God telling me like, come outside. Let's go on a walk. It wasn't storming or anything, thankfully. It was a quiet winter evening, and the roads were clear. And I was like, I wasn't sure how to tell like my siblings that like, I need to go outside for a sec, because like, that's not something we did, where it's like, God needs to talk to me. Like, that's not really like normal in LDS culture, but that's what I felt. So I went outside and I just like am talking to the sky. I'm just talking to God, just kind of unloading about all these stresses I'm dealing with of like, what am I going to do? I'm really stressed about this position I'm in with summer sales. I don't feel good about it. What am I like, how I feel like I'm distant from you. I haven't like been keeping up with my prayers. Just, you know, the kind of prayer you have when you're dealing with feeling kind of isolated, distant from God. I felt his presence there. I felt him comfort me. And I basically felt him say like, Thomas, you don't need to do that if you don't want to. Which was really good to hear, because I was only getting involved with it because of this role that I had assumed of, I need to be able to provide and I need to make a lot of money so that I can do that role. And that was learned within the church culture of, this is the role of a man and you need to be able to do it. And it is good for men to provide. I don't have a problem with that. But the way I had internalized it was kind of unhealthy. But that's, and I can take responsibility for that, the way I chose to, you know, internalize that. Like, I don't need to blame the church for that.
It's very much a society thing too. You know, like, we're supposed to make lots of money and you shouldn't get married until you have like this much money. And I mean, my parents got married and they had like $200 to their name and they did just fine for themselves. Yeah. Was it hard? Yes. But there's value in being dirt poor with the person you love, you know, like.
There sure is. Yeah. We'll get to that part of the story.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have this idea that I think is coming from God of like, you need to be a provider, Thomas. And now I have this other thing from God saying, Thomas, you don't need to do summer sales. It's okay. I'm like, grab onto that. Good. Okay. I feel the burden lift. And then I find there's another way, and it is called being an EFY counselor. When am I going to learn? Right? No, but I felt really good about that. Like, I'm going to be an EFY counselor the next summer. And so that's what I did. And there at the EFY training sessions, they're like, okay, come to EFY if you want to strengthen your testimony. Go to summer sales if you want to lose your testimony. Oh. They were like bitter. I'm like, okay, this is how we feel about this. Okay. I think the people who run EFY wish they're hurting for money. And so maybe that's why I don't need to get into that. Anyway, that's irrelevant.
Okay. So how was EFY?
It was awesome. I loved it. Meeting the youth, because I actually did it one summer when I was young, and it was awesome. It's like, oh my goodness, this is the 1 week of my whole young adulthood where it's cool to be into the gospel. Like, it was so fun. The energy and the enthusiasm for the scriptures and for the gospel. Whoever started EFY, like, that was a move of God. That was inspired. And I actually think I did look into the history, and it's like, I think even within these organized religions, like, God moves upon people to start good things. And I think EFY was one of those things in my experience. Mm-hmm. I know not everyone has the same experience.
Sure.
But so I chose to be a counselor, and, you know, they pair you up as EFY counselors, they call it your right? Your co-counselor. So it's a young man, young woman together as co-counselors. And every single time I was paired with someone who like already had a boyfriend, and I was like, thank you, God. Like, there's no weird tension to like try to start something. Like the kids, they would try to ship their counselors, like relationship, right? Get them to date. And I didn't have that, thankfully. But towards the end of the summer, I was still emailing my missionary, and she was really focused on her mission, and like, good for her. And I think I kind of started putting two and two together that like she didn't want to be a missionary and a girlfriend. And it wasn't very good for her. I could tell, or for me, because here I'm just like self-flagellating, like whipping myself basically by not going on like dates or meeting people, and for what, right? And so I decided finally it was time to just like let her go, in a sense of like not restricting myself to just her. So I opened myself up and started to go on some more dates. And there was one EFY counselor girl she was bubbly and she was fun to be around. And so I asked her out, and we ended up actually dating after the EFY summer had ended. And I was like, I don't know. I was very, in gear, I guess you could say, for moving forward on the covenant path. And so, and one of my like North Stars, there were two quotes basically of when it comes to choosing a spouse. The first one was from Spencer W. Kimball, which basically says that like soulmates are a fiction. And I don't know if he's projecting based on his own relationship or something, but like, I don't know, but, or his life experiences where he feels like that's not real. And he's saying, but like, and so he's basically saying if any two people get married and work hard enough at it, like they can make it work.
Yeah. I'm very familiar with that quote. Yeah. That was a very important quote to me once upon a time.
Yeah, and then also, but there's the other one, Bruce R. McConkie. I loved Bruce R. McConkie. I took it as a sacred honor that I even got to serve in the same mission as him, and that like threw one of my pioneer lines down a little one, like we're related distantly, and so it was Bruce R. McConkie. He was the man. He wrote Mormon Doctrine. I loved that book. Like, anyway, one of his quotes was like, I never prayed about who I was going to marry.
Yep.
And I mean, he like redeems himself because the second half of that quote is him saying like, but if I had done things right, I would have prayed. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, I only remembered the first half of the quote.
Kind of like, we don't have to pray because we can work it out with anybody, right?
Yeah. And it's like this radical agency where it's like, you don't need to get guidance from God. Just choose your choices. And like there's an aspect to that that's true, but it was like, throw all caution to the wind. Don't like make sure you're actually compatible with someone. Just like pick someone who's in the church and just work really hard and you can make it work. And unfortunately, that was my mindset.
Okay, so let me ask you some questions about your views on church dating culture.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, hit me. What do you got?
Do you feel like the church was preparing you to date in a way that God would see fit? A way that you could actually find somebody that you're aligned with?
No.
Okay. So when you're going on dates, was it just play? Did you have serious conversations? What was that dynamic for you like?
Well, okay, I shouldn't be so heavy-handed with my no, because there's room for it to be good. Plenty of people have like followed the church kind of the culture to get into a good relationship. That's like, I don't want to say everyone who is like married in the temple has a bad relationship.
Sure.
That's just not true.
Right.
So the tools I feel like I was given, like, okay, for the strength of youth, that was like what should be in the Doctrine and Covenants, basically, as far as I was concerned as a teenager and a young adult. It's like, this is the dating standards, treat the other person with respect. It was very like, my approach to it was very much like, how do you treat the person in the setting you're in, as opposed to like, how do you vet this person to see if they're going to be a good like life partner? So that whole aspect of it was kind of missing. Like, I understood, common sense, make sure you have shared values. Mm-hmm. But when church membership becomes a proxy for shared values, that's where the discernment falls off the cliff. That's where it did for me.
Because there's an assumption that we're in the church, so we all kind of have the same beliefs, the same thoughts, the same ways in which we do things. There's just an assumption there that we don't have to have hard conversations.
Yeah. And so and I'm familiar with your story and how like there were some hard conversations that needed to happen that maybe like were probed around a bit. And so like in my experience, I actually really did like cutting straight to the heart of some like tough conversations. And I thought I was good at it too, but I guess I don't have the best track record, and we'll get into that. But, but as far as the church goes, it's like, I feel like it's a little bit of a roll of the dice of like, who are your leaders? Who are your mentors in the church setting who are able to give you good advice? And maybe were your parents able to give you good advice? But so it's just a little bit of a roll of the dice, I think. It's not really set up, but like there's definitely lots of, like those quotes I shared with you that make it hard to assess compatibility when it's like, we have a current temple recommend, check. Return missionary, maybe, if it's a guy, check. And it's like, as long as someone fits those external criteria, it's like, great, we're good. I don't know. Is that the sense you got?
Yeah. So, and also on top of that, like going to singles wards, and we did like dating panels in our singles ward where they would have.
And like question and answer.
Yes. Those made me cringe so hard.
Were you always like on the panel?
No.
Oh, no.
I was never on the panel, and I was like, why don't we put somebody that could actually give good advice on this panel? But it was always like, the message was, go out and have lots of fun when you're dating. Have lots of fun. And I'm sitting here after I was engaged thinking, what about dating is actually fun? After you've been through this over here, like there's nothing fun anymore. And all I'm hearing is have lots of fun. Girls, ask guys on dates, have lots of fun. And
yeah,
there's just more to it than just having lots of fun, because I think in our process of having lots of fun, we're avoiding really important conversations we need to be having to build relationships.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of like assumptions that happen. And having lots of fun, it's like, what's that going to do? You're already in like a new relationship. All those new feelings are there, and the excitement and the hormones. It's like, of course it's going to be fun. You're just starting out. But like, if you're going to be with someone for the rest of your life, like it's not just going to be rainbows and butterflies every single day. Like you're going to have different conflict resolution styles. You're going to have different communication styles, and you got to learn how to deal with that and not just like throw up your arms defensively every time your chosen pattern of engaging with something isn't the right one. And so that's something that, you learn with time. You can never know everything about someone.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I just think that as you go on with your life with someone, it's not just action-packed like it is when you're dating. You're not constantly going, out to eat 24/7 and going skydiving and going on all these adventure dates. It's just not real, but it gives this vision of you're going to get married and you're going to have all this fun all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like, it was dating and getting like preparing for marriage was just kind of like lumped together as almost like a conveyor belt. It was like, you just do it. You just do the things and it'll happen. You'll just find yourself in the temple one day. Well, no, they didn't say it that way, but it's basically what it felt like.
Right.
Pick someone from your singles ward, get to know them, date them, date lots of people. And then you'll find the special person that the Lord has for you. Depending on, how liberal or conservative, when it comes to Spencer W. Kimball's quote, the person happens to be. Yeah.
And if you reach a certain age and you're not there yet, people are like, what's wrong with them? Like,
yes.
what?
Yes. Yeah. No. And we'll come back around to that.
Okay. All right.
We'll come back around to that because I ended up, this EFY counselor and I, we dated through the fall of that year and through the winter and into the spring. And it was kind of rocky because we didn't have that much in common, but I saw that as like a good thing because I was, and I think I could attribute this to certain things within my experience in the church where it's like, it's good to be different because then you get to learn how to love in a new way. And so I took that to heart and I mean, that plus the mixture of like, it's a new relationship, right? But when we got engaged, I mean, she was really afraid of commitment because she was afraid, like her biggest fear was divorce. And she was like very upfront about that. And it's like, I don't know why you'd be afraid of that. Like there's no reason why we would do that. Like if we're committed to each other, like it can work out, right? At Spencer W. Kimball. And so when we got engaged, it was really interesting because it was like the fun and like the new relationship, like fluffiness just like immediately went away, and it just turned to like stress.
When you got engaged?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And it's like, you would think this is a red flag that I would have paid attention to, but I was just very persistent and thought like, well, no, I've like gotten this far. Like there's no real reason why it can't work out if we don't just work hard. So we ended up getting sealed in the Manti Temple that next summer. And it was not good. It was not good. I remember the day of the sealing. It was like the most happy part, the most like peaceful part of that entire day was me changing in the dressing rooms before the ceremony.
Whoa.
That was like the best part of that day for me.
So what made you feel like you couldn't end the relationship before you got to the day of the sealing?
Maybe just inexperience. And well, definitely the stigma of like failed relationships means something is wrong with the person.
Yes.
With me.
That is
right?
a huge stigma in the church, outside the church, in society. If you've been engaged, you're like used goods to other people. And so it's a huge stigma for sure.
Yeah. And it's like, well, and like she wasn't like awful. It was like, she was like nice. But it's just like, we didn't have like anything in common. And so we just like weren't compatible. And I know maybe the older generation hears that word and they're like, well, like you're not compatible, like just like work harder. Like, I don't know.
Work harder.
I don't know. But because like, you know, people get divorced like a lot these days, and there's like a low level of commitment, and like marriage doesn't seem to have the importance and sanctity that it had in the past. And so like, I understand where the boomers are coming from. Like it's a real concern. But we get married, and like, I do remember thinking on the day of the sealing, like, man, all these people are showing up for me. Like, and I'm thinking of like different people I know in my life who have gotten divorced. And I'm thinking like, it would be so weird after seeing all this support from all these people. Like if this didn't work out, like there's a lot of pressure to just like make it work. So, and I was just like committed to being a good husband. Come hell or high water, I was going to be the one who sacrificed my needs and just like let myself become a doormat. But it was almost like I welcomed it. Like I didn't even need to be with someone who was like mean necessarily. It was like I was brought up in a way that like I was taught that like to be like Jesus is to totally just throw away all your needs and let people walk over you. So I like invited it.
I wonder too if it's a societal pressure where, I mean, I heard a ton growing up, marriage is really hard. Does anyone ever say anything good about marriage anymore? Because like all I've ever heard is that marriage is really hard. And the one example I have is my parents of a good marriage, and everyone else is like, it's really hard. So, you know, you kind of like hear these things over and over again. And you're like, okay.
Well, and it kind of causes you to lower the bar in some sense, where you're like, well, like you watch shows and movies where it's like true love. And like, I remember when I was 16, I believed in that. But I guess when I was like 22 or whatever, I was so worn down by life that I didn't like know if I believed in that anymore. And you know what I mean? Yeah. And
so you settle. And I don't know, when I was in the YSA ward, a lot of leaders would be like, Claire, your standards are too high. Your standards are too high. I was like, well, that's why I'm still single.
Yeah. So I did settle in a sense that, I mean, I set my standards to a place that wasn't, you know, in my best interest. And, you know, and so it just meant that like, okay, my standards were met, but I should have probably checked my standards. And I didn't have the context or the ability to like search for red flags or like, this is going to spell trouble down the road. I just didn't know. And so, that it was a really hard relationship. It ultimately did end in divorce by me. It was 3.5 years of basically a roommate situation, like where we were friends with each other, but like it never really got to the point of what I would call marriage because, she had some hangups and like our marriage was never even consummated for 3.5 years. And so that was the ultimate reason why I felt like this can't go on. And that will come later. I don't want to get too far ahead in the story, but that's the ultimate end of that relationship. So I called it off. Yeah.
Okay. So my understanding from your pre-notes is that you kind of started, in a sense, your awakening journey during this time where you were married, right?
Yes.
Okay. So let's kind of get into that. So you're in this marriage that isn't very good, and kind of what were your first steps to waking up, and what did your study look like and your relationship with God look like at the time?
Well, I still I would still turn to God when I was going through really hard times. And I think getting into this marriage, it was a little bit of a crucible of pain and just difficulties. And especially being told your whole life, like, okay, law of chastity, law of chastity, law of chastity, and then getting married. And that's just like, that whole area is just not even functioning. And it's like, oh, that was really disorienting. Cause that was like, okay, I'll just, if God calls me to go through hard things, I'll go through hard things. And so I put up with that. But anyway, did
you guys have any hard conversations about I want children, I don't want children before you got married?
I think we did of like, okay, yeah, we want children, but like not immediately. That was kind of like this, we got to get to know each other. I'm like, yeah, of course. Like we'll go a few years before we start having children. Like that's fine. And then, so I thought we were on the same page. Ultimately, she changed her mind. She's like, I don't 3 years later, but after like my awakening and all this stuff, she's like, I don't know if I want kids with you. And so it's like, okay. And like, I'm very thankful now for that. But anyway, that's that. And we'll get to that.
Okay.
But yeah, so the struggles and the difficulty of this position I was in, plus being a student at BYU, studying the applied math program there, it's really, really academically rigorous. They basically cram a bachelor's and a master's degree into one. And like you're working like 60 plus hour weeks to get all your homework done and everything. So that, and then like trying to balance, salvaging a rocky relationship and kind of becoming a codependent caretaker on myself to just always like, oh, are you okay? Like, hold myself responsible for her emotions and dealing with all of this and juggling. It was really hard, to find peace. So part of my coping mechanism was to do deep dives into the scriptures. And because that was like a place where I felt like, okay, this is at least going right, where I can I can study this thing or that thing and go deeper. And I really liked reading every nook and cranny of the blogosphere, the bloggernacle, I guess some people call it, where it's like Mormon blogs online and books and YouTube channels and just kind of like weird fringe stuff sometimes. Cause I like to know what's out there. Who's this Denver Snuffer guy? What's going on? What's he all about? What's over here? This Mormon Stories podcast. What's that? And I would just try to learn it all. It was very head heavy at this time. And maybe it was influenced by being a student, but I really liked learning. And so I would just focus on learning and learning and learning everything I could and reading and reading and reading. But not so much praying. And so my relationship with God, I don't think you could say I was like on fire for Jesus at this moment. It was very, very heavy because when I was a missionary, by the way, I forgot to mention this, I was like the Bible basher.
I'm sure you were good at it.
Well, yes, I was quite good at it. But I learned the hard way on my mission. Like God taught me that like that is not how he rolls. And so I learned that that's not okay. But but anyway, I still like had the tendencies to want to like be able to prove any point. Like, oh, someone believes this. Like, okay, what scriptures support that? And like wanting to investigate that. And so, okay, when did I start? Oh, I do have to just put one shout out for when I was at BYU and just like having a hard time. I did do 1 year of men's chorus. I auditioned and got into the BYU men's chorus. And that was by far the most spiritually meaningful aspect of my time at BYU.
Nice.
So the songs it is wonderful. Like I would tear up just thinking about some of the songs we sang in worship of our Savior. So that was kind of like a lifeline for me to feel close to God.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was wonderful. But it couldn't last because it took up time in my schedule and I had to get back to the books. So I did that 2018, 2019, 2020 rolls around. And I am, of course, COVID, right? And the whole world shuts down. And I had an internship lined up to go to like Dayton, Ohio for some like machine learning, computer science internship because I had learned some computer science skills in addition to mathematics. But then like a week before we were supposed to move out there, they're like, COVID, you can't come live here. Like it needs to be remote. It's like, we had already sold our contract for our apartment we were staying in for the summer. So it's like, what are we going to do? So my wife at the time, her parents had condos in Phoenix, Arizona, which were vacant during the summer because who wants to live in Phoenix in the summer?
Right.
So they graciously let us stay there for the summer, and like we paid a little bit for it. But so we were in Phoenix, and that was a really hard summer because it was also like George Floyd and like all of the other like, racism issues. And like I was with someone who was more on the left side of those issues. And so I gained a lot of sympathy and understanding for how that worldview operates and how they see things, even though I like vehemently disagreed with it. But that was so hard. I remember like reading the book of Isaiah of like, they shall call good evil and evil good. And with all the political upheaval during that year, it was like, this is crazy. The world is upside down. And I wanted to understand Isaiah better. And I actually read Abraham Gileadi's book, Isaiah Decoded, for the first time in 2020. And that's kind of like the gateway drug for a lot of people.
Yes, it is. It was for my family too.
Yep. See, okay. And so I read that book and it was like, this is incredible. Like the book of Isaiah is a prophecy of the future. This is incredible. But then it's also talking about like dumb dogs that do not bark.
You're like, what does that mean?
And he's like saying all this stuff about how like the leaders of Israel are leading the people astray and this is going to happen in the latter days. And I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. Like that would never happen to us. But like, I guess eventually it's going to happen. That's crazy. Maybe some of the leaders can be corrupted. Wow, crazy. And I just kind of filed that away. 2020, but like something I should have mentioned. One of my doctrinal hobbies or doctrinal pursuits, it wasn't a hobby, it was a sincere pursuit of understanding, is I wanted to understand what we learn about we don't really learn about it in the temple unless you pay really close attention. But, okay, sorry, this is going to seem like I'm just jumping to something else. But like, there's that quote from Joseph Smith about like, there is something that very few people understand and only ought to be taught in its proper place. And it is that after a man has been baptized and received the first, like the gift of the Holy Ghost, this is the first comforter. And if he continues faithful and proves himself, the time will come when the Lord shall say to him, son, thou shalt be exalted. And it shall then be his privilege to receive the second comforter. And what is the second comforter? The great and grand secret, like it is nothing more or less than the Lord Jesus Christ himself. And that quote, I just like hung on to it so tightly. I heard it for the first time as a teenager. I thought like, wait a second, we can see Jesus in this life? I want to know more about that. And so that was always like one thing that I really, really wanted to understand more of. Before my mission, during my mission, and after my mission. In fact, on my mission, I was reading, I was that elder. On P days, I would just study the Doctrine and Covenants, like student manual. Like that was fun for me. Because I wanted to understand the gospel better. And I was so shocked when I was in the church library one day because it had internet access on the computer. And so I could browse LDS.org. And so it had a gold mine of stuff. And I went to like the gospel doctrines manual, and I went to the lesson on exaltation. And I read at the beginning of the lesson, it says like, disclaimer, warning, like, do not attempt to answer any questions or discuss anything about the second anointing. And I read that as a missionary. I about flew out of my chair. I was like, it's real. There it is. Like, there's evidence for it. Because I had put enough together through like the books I was reading, the things I was trying to learn, like only church approved materials though. So like before my mission and on my mission, where it's like, okay, I understand that there's this ritual where it's a secret temple ceremony where you receive a special promise and it's called the second anointing. And after you receive it, then you can receive the second comforter. Then Jesus can come to you. Then you can see the visions of eternity. But like, you need to have this experience in the temple. And that was the best of my understanding, but there was so much confusion and secrecy shrouded around it. And I always wanted to understand it because I want the promise of eternal life from God. I want that assurance from him that I have a place in his kingdom. And Joseph Smith seemed really, really confident that like, this is the privilege of all of the saints to receive this promise. And you read the epistles of Paul about like the more sure word of prophecy and making our calling election sure. And it's just like, part and parcel of being a saint, you know? So anyway, that was always like on the back burner for me. Like, okay, how can I develop a relationship with Jesus Christ or prove myself faithful to the point where I get this promise of eternal life from him, which I had tangled up with the second comforter, the second anointing in the temple, right? And so anyway, coming back to after my mission, I also really liked to study the second anointing and the second comforter, which led me to listen to Mormon Stories podcast because they have interviewed some guests on there who, like a stake president one time who said it happened to him, he received it. And even though I was like a faithful member of the church, I was just kind of like collecting data because I wanted to figure this out for myself. I wanted to put this puzzle together because it's like, if I need to be a mission president one day or something, and that's how I prove myself worthy, and then I'll be invited in by one of the apostles to receive this, you know, I just need to figure out what the path is, and then I'll follow it. I don't care what it is. I'll just follow it because I want that really bad. So it was me researching things that I shouldn't have been researching that led me to start to crack open the door where it's like, okay, there are some skeletons in the closet. It was specifically learning that the second anointing. So I found this author, this polygamous author, Ogden Kraut. He's like written so many books, and his son has published them on a website that you can go read. And one of the books is about like the second comforter and seeing Jesus in this life. And the whole book is just like quotes from the scriptures and journal discourses about seeing Jesus. Like the day of this life is the time to prepare to meet God. And like we can see him in this life. And it was really cool to read someone who was validating these beliefs I had started to form. And I was reading that book and it was awesome. I finished the book, closed out of the webpage, scrolled through his other books, and I'm seeing things like a book like Jesus was married and things like Jesus was a polygamist and then like polygamy. And I'm starting to go down the path of understanding more about the significance of polygamy in the celestial order of things. Yeah. So, and I remember telling one of my companions in the MTC of like, have you read D&C 132? Like, look at this. Like, if God ever calls us to like live plural marriage, like we have to do it. He's like, what the heck, man? Like you do that? And I'm like, well, if God asks me to, like I'd do anything. Like, of course I'm not actually thinking about like what it would entail. I'm just like, well, if God asks for me to do it, I'll do it. Mm-hmm. And he's like, how does your girlfriend feel about that? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, but it's not real now. Like it's not happening. So I don't know. But I just remember thinking like he wasn't faithful enough to understand that like this is how it works. Right. Anyway, yeah. So I'm starting to learn about polygamy, and I'm like, wait a second, because I'm reading the journal discourses where it's like, if this church, like John Taylor, like if this church ever turns away from polygamy, it's the same day that we apostatize from the truth. And he's basically setting it up that like he's like, polygamy is as essential to our faith as baptism is. And I'm like, wait a second, baptism is essential for our salvation. Putting two and two together. Polygamy is essential for our salvation. And then I'm like telling my wife at the time, like, oh my goodness, can you believe this? And she's like, I don't feel very comfortable with that.
You're like, let's get another wife.
Thankfully, I never got that far.
Praise
but-
the Lord. You didn't.
No, I would have never disobeyed the brethren. But then I started to like, wait a second, like they said if we turned away from polygamy, then we would be in apostasy. We turned away from polygamy. These are prophets, seers, and revelators telling us that if we turn from polygamy, we are in apostasy. Therefore, we are in apostasy. And I thought about this. So this was early 2021. I'm like starting to learn these things, but I'm also reading so many other blogs where I find another blog that's like, D&C 132 is plagiarized. It's not written by Joseph Smith. I thought, I've never heard that before. Like, is there anything to that? It's kind of like out there, like blog. I'm like, yeah, maybe, but like, how do you explain temples and like all this stuff? So I didn't really know what to do with it. Didn't go too far. But as I learn more and more and more, okay, over these months, I graduate BYU, have tons of time on my hands now where I can just read and listen to podcasts and videos where I'm learning that, yeah, the temple ordinances, like temple sealing, the way it's practiced now is a watered down version of the plural marriage sealings. And when I learned that, it was like, I had actually already come to a conviction by that point in time that D&C 132 and plural marriage was incongruous with other scripture that talked about, the sanctity of like one man, one woman marriage. So I had come to kind of I was persuaded by the intellectual argument that plural marriage is incompatible with God's plans. I don't think you could say I had like a testimony of it. It was more, I was very head heavy at this time. Okay. A lot of my studies was, study by faith and learn by study and by faith, right? I was in a by study phase. I remember at one point I'm running on a treadmill, working out one night, and I'm listening to a podcast where he's, going through like, the temple sealing ceremony is just this watered down version of polygamy. And I just feel like, that camera effect in movies when like the main character is having this realization and it's like the depth of field like changes and it like zooms out and it's like, like I had that moment. Okay.
All right.
And it's like, oh my goodness, like it's not true. And it was so hard. It's like what is going on? I was so disoriented. And this started me down the slippery slope of like new Mormon history, where it's like Joseph Smith was a polygamist. Can you believe what he did with a 14-year-old? He lied to Emma, and all of the successors after him, Brigham Young on, they're all just as dirty. But like Joseph started it, and so Mormon Stories podcast, Radio Free Mormon, Mormon Discussions, all those ex-Mormon podcasts, I started to sympathize with them a lot because I had become persuaded of the false narrative about Joseph Smith. And oh boy, I was going through the stages of grief for sure, especially the anger stage. I was so angry at the church for lying to me. So angry. Because I gave them my whole heart, my whole life, and they lied. And no one in my family understood to the level that I wanted them to, because I was now untouchable. I was someone to be feared because I didn't have a testimony anymore. And it's like I had leprosy. And so all of the people who used to be my support system were not my support system. And so that led me to turn to these podcasts, these unfaithful podcasts that are just spewing doubt and stirring the pot. It's like a spirit, like a familiar spirit that governs ex-Mormonism, angry ex-Mormonism. And I became possessed by it for several months.